Welcome back to the OneView Parent Portal training sessions. In this third video, we're going to go ahead and log into the parent account and actually complete the one online form that is required. So I'm on the parent login page. I'll go ahead and I have my account name and password already keyed in, so I'll click on login. Again, each time you log in, you do see this agreement. Just as a reminder, students under the age of 18 are not allowed to create the parent account and or complete the forms. That must be done by a parent or guardian only. If the student is 18 years or older, they are allowed to go ahead and log in and complete this process on their own, although it's even recommended for those students to have a parent or guardian nearby just to make sure that they have all the information necessary to complete the forms. So again, I'll agree and continue to the portal. As a reminder, if you have more than one student, those students will show up in this drop-down list. I have just one student linked to this test account. If you had multiple, you would need to select each student, and you do need to fill out and submit the forms for each student individually. So you'll complete one student, you'll come back here to the dashboard, drop the list down, select your second student, go back to submit and view online forms, and submit the information for that second and or potentially third student. So we're going to submit and view online forms, and I'm going to go ahead and do the student information and medical authorization form. Forms broken down into multiple parts. Most of the fields, or a lot of the fields on here, are required. Some of them are going to be pre-populated based on information we have from the student application. So in our student information system, for example, we already have the student's name, Jedi Knight, male, school district that they're enrolled in right now at Beverly Career Center, their grade, date of birth. All we ask is that you verify is this correct, yes or no. Anything where you see please select, you will have to use the drop down list and select yes or no. Failure to do so will not allow you to submit the actual form. So yes, this is information is correct. Then we have the residential address. If that has changed for some reason since we last got record of that, you could select a yes here, and you'd be given fields in which you could populate a new residential address. In this case, I'm going to say no, that's fine, we're good to go, the address has not changed. If for some reason you have a different mailing address, so this might be where the student lives, but for some reason you want any mail correspondence from a school district to go to a different address, you can select the different mailing address drop-down list and say yes, and then go ahead and submit that address. Again, I'm going to set that to no. And we'll move on to part two. In part two, called name, if the student has a name that they'd like to be called other than their given name, or other than the name we have on file up here, you could go ahead and key that in. Notice it's not bold, not asterisk, it's not required. So you'll want to make sure that you read this information above the fields, because that gives you information about which fields are required and which are not. Primary telephone number, if we have one on file, I believe that pre-populates, but in this case, it's not, so I'm going to go ahead and supply one because it is bold and asterisk, which means it's required. County of residence, again, drop-down list. That should be pre-populated. If for some reason that were wrong, you could correct that there. And then the students live with, you have check boxes or other, and if you choose other, we need you to describe that. So I'm going to say student lives with father. That would be me. And then what number would you like to receive your automated dialer notifications? Those take the form of two types of phone calls. One are attendance calls. If your student is absent for any reason, even if they send a note, you will receive an automated message on the day that they are absent from an automated attendance dialing system stating that your son or daughter was not in school on that day. Just again, a verification notification to you. We also use that for announcements, occasionally broadcast announcements or emergency announcements that we need to get out quickly to all families. So your options there are the primary telephone number, which is the number right up here, or parent guardian phone numbers, home, work, or cell. And you'll see these fields a little bit later on under the parent guardian information section. So you can select which phone number you would like to receive that attendance call and automated dialer for broadcast announcements. We are required to collect information from the United States, or for the United States Department of Education and U.S. Department of Agriculture. Again, that's primarily ethnicity information. So is the student Hispanic or Latino in heritage? No. And then if not, what race or ethnicity are they? So in this case, I'll say white. And we're on to section 3. Parent and guardian information. Is there a legal custody order for the child? Again, please select. I will say no. If you had selected yes, we would just ask that you would key in here who has legal custody. And if there's been a change in the custody status of the child, if you'll check this box here next to the red text, that just gives us an alert So we're notified, especially if they were a student here last year and there's now been a custody change. It's important for us to know that fact. So if you would just check that box if that's the case. You are required to fill out information for parent guardian number 1. Parent guardian number 2 is optional, so we're going to put in this information. And drop down list here, select who that individual is. The date of birth is not required. We do need at least one phone number in here. So you can put in work, your home number, your cell phone number, or all three, but at least one phone number has to be populated in this field. The reason they're not bolded is we don't require all three phone numbers. You may not have all three types of phones, but we do require at least one phone number to be in this field. Email address is not required. Employer name, occupation, not required. Lives with student is yes or no. And then same address as student, a checkbox there as well. And then again, the parent guardian number 2 is not required. You are encouraged to put that information. Again, the more contacts we would have if we needed to get in touch with somebody during the day, the better. But it is not a required section of fields to be replaced or to be completed. Part 4, we're on to the medical history information. These are all drop-down lists, and based on your selections here, you may be given other options. So, for example, does the child have allergies? If you say yes, then you'll be given an additional part of the form that says, okay, check which type of allergies, give us which types of foods or medications or bees, for example, or other allergens that they might come in contact with, and a typical reaction that we might look for that would indicate that they've been in contact with that type of allergen. In this case, I'm going to set that to no, and that part of the form will disappear. Diabetes, seizures, or asthma, same thing. If you select yes there, you'll be prompted for additional information. Check boxes to indicate which of those three or all of them, and then additional explanation. Medical conditions, again, any other medical conditions we might need to know about. Again, if so, please list those. Do they take any daily or as needed prescription medications? Again, not over the counter, but prescriptions. If yes, then please list what they are, and then you have to download the prescription medication form under the printable forms library, have that signed off on a doctor and returned with your student. I'll set that to no. Does your child take any prescription medication during the hours that they're at school? Again, this one is, do they take any daily or as needed? So an inhaler, for example, a prescription inhaler is as needed, not necessarily daily. The next one is, do they take any prescriptions that they're going to take on a daily basis that they'll have to take while they're at school? So if yes, again, you'll indicate, and the prescription medication form, again, is required. Do they take any non-prescription over-the-counter medications? If so, what would those be? And list it again. I'll set that to no. And the meningococcal vaccine, has the child received that after his or her 16th birthday? If you select no there, you'll be given a link to the Ohio Revised Code section that shows that is now required by law in order to attend a public school. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to yes, and then they will need a copy of the immunization record, so we have that on file for your student. And finally, in the non-prescription medication permission form, these are over-the-counter and non-prescription medications that may be administered by our school nurse. You are either giving or denying permission to the school nurse to be able to provide these for your students. So you can select yes, but you could put in exemptions. So yes, everything, but no Benadryl, for example. Or you could state, no, I don't want my student to be given any of these medications by the school nurse. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes with no exemptions. You must put in at least one emergency contact. So again, I'll put in my information again. And then indicate whether that emergency contact is allowed to pick the student up here at school. Part 6 is the consent or refusal for emergency medical information or treatment. Whether you grant consent or deny consent, we do ask that you provide doctor, dentist, specialist, or hospital information and phones. That just gives us the ability to provide that information to an emergency care. If a squad had to be called for a student, for example, that allows us to provide that information to the hospital or to the transport agency so they know who to contact. I'm going to go ahead. If you do not grant consent, or if you do not grant a consent in order for them to be treated, you can describe, in which cases the authorities may take, what type of following actions the authority could take to treat your child. I'm going to say I grant consent. I'm going to actually skip filling this information out. I don't believe it'll flag the form. I believe I'll still be able to present or to submit the form. Medical conditions past surgeries, I'm going to say yes. And if there is, again, please list. I'll go ahead and set that to no. And then the date of your last tetanus shot. And the final section is part 7. It's the agreement, parent-student agreement forms. These are just the forms that you would typically get in printed form. We provide them electronically. So, for example, if you wanted to see the acceptable use policy for computer network services here at Upper Valley Career Center, click on the blue link here. You can then read down through this form, and then you can come back to your form and either grant or deny yes or no agreement to that. There are some sections that have both parent and student agreements, so the parent will be signing off for both the parent and the student. The first one is you have study trip consent, acceptable use policy, the one-to-one agreement, that's for the laptop or Chromebook that the student will use for the years that they're here. Student handbook, again, you can read the entire handbook by clicking on this. You're encouraged to at least download it and have that available or read that. We are also required to collect family military status. So it's a yes or no drop down indicating the student's family living situation includes one or both parents having served in military service. So in this case, whether they're active duty, reserves, retired, separated, whatever, in case I never served, so I'll leave that as never served. And the final one is the media opt-out form for photographs, recordings, or other media types for news articles, flyers, or any school-related publications. And the final step is to then go ahead and sign off on the form, typing your name in it. The date will pre-populate for you, and then you can save and submit the form to the district. You cannot save the form and come back immediately to it. You have to save it and submit it to the district. So this form does have to be completed in one setting. And that form will now show as submitted status, and the Upper Valley Career Center staff will get a notification that that form is ready for us to review. It is possible that the form can be reviewed and sent back to the parent or guardian for revisions. If that's the case, you should receive an automated email from the system requesting that you log back in and correct and or supply additional information. That concludes this training video on the student information and medical authorization form. Again, I thank you for your time.